Whoa, buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and good morning to Tuesday. Holy cow, 32 degrees in the beautiful subtropical paradise of Homer here as we get ready to go for today. I let the dog out this morning and was like, oh my. Oh, it's kind of nice. But that does mean it's a little wet and icy all across the south central area today, including freezing rain warnings for all of the Matsu, Anchorage, the Kenai Peninsula, etc., etc. So strap on your ice cleats and your skates because it's going to be a little slick out there today. So that's what's going on. We'll get into more of that in hour two, but without further ado, let's dive into this, shall we? Shall we jump into it and talk about the week? This is the first weekly top three. I mean, since I took my vacation, but also since the certification of the election. So let's get into this and do our thing this morning. Joining us this morning for the weekly top three is, of course, the one, the only Brad Keithley with Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Let's bring him on to discuss this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today, and it's great to be talking to a corporate mogul now on the air.
It's a corporate mogul. I wrote an email the other day that said something like, I'm the president, chief broadcaster, door greeter, and janitor. That's pretty much it. It's everything is filled by a single person. It's been good. So anyway,
congratulations on the move. I think that's great, and it's wonderful for you and Terry and the family, and I'm very, very proud of you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's It's terrifying. It's exhilarating, I guess. That's not the right word. Chris Story would chastise me. It's not terrifying, it's exhilarating. You're alive when you're taking on this kind of stuff. Anyway, I really appreciate it, Brad. All right, well, we've got some stuff to talk about today, and man, there's a lot to unpack here because the election's been certified since then. We've seen some changing hearts and minds on Alaska LNG. We've seen all kinds of stuff. So let's get started this morning today with the brand new 10-year forecast as number one of the weekly top three. And I have a feeling that the pucker factor is about to be high. So Brad, just hit us with what you got this morning.
It is going to be high, Michael. The 10-year forecast, for those of you who are now running to the governor's website or to the OMB website, it's not out yet. It's due out by December 15th. But we're in the period. The way they put the forecast together from the standpoint of oil prices is they look at a 10-day period. They average a 10-day period for the futures market somewhere along in here before December 15th. And that's the basis for the oil price. And we're in that 10-day period. So you can pretty well project, and the prices are staying fairly stable through this period. So you can pretty well project where the 10-year forecast is going to be. And it's not good, to say the least. Looking at the budget, as we've talked about it on the show, and as we talked about it in the last segment a couple of weeks ago, it's not even the FY25, even the budget we're in right now, is not looking good. Oil prices aren't living up to the projections that were made. In the spring revenue forecast, they aren't living up to the projections on which the FY25 budget is based. And even though the FY25 budget was put together in a way that has some cushion, that is, they took a bunch out of the PFD to create an additional like $140 million or $150 million cushion that then they could spend in the supplemental. Even though they created that cushion in it, all the cushion's gone. And the projected prices now for FY25, we're about 40% of the way through the year. So they're beginning to be a little bit firm. The projected prices for FY25 are going to come in. What we're going to see in the revenue forecast is they're going to come in fairly low. In fact, on the current trajectory, the baseline budget is built on $75 a barrel. The cushion was at $78 a barrel. So between 78 and 75, they built in that cushion. Current forecast, looking at the current futures market for the remainder of FY25, is about $73 a barrel, $2 a barrel below the baseline. And that, when you factor that in for projected volumes, that's about $110 million or so below the budget. So we're starting this incoming legislature is going to hit Juneau with a forecast that's going to say even FY25 is underwater.
Right.
That they've got to find $110 million, either draw it from the CBR, which doesn't have much, or find adjustments that are going to offset that $110 million. That's day one. And that means there's no money for a supplemental. And so any supplementals they have to make is going to be an additional amount on top of that $110 million.
And that doesn't take into account any of the legislative priorities we're going to talk about in a bit, though, as well, which could account for millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, and that's where we shift into looking forward at the 10-year forecast. And if you've got that chart, this would be a good time to throw that up.
You bet. The little one or the big one here. There we go.
The bigger one. The one that has pictures as opposed to
the one that has pictures. All right, here you go. There you go.
All right, thank you. So this looks at what the 10-year forecast is likely going to talk about or look like in terms of revenues and projected spending levels. And I've built this. This has FY25. FY25 is at the left end. FY33 is at the right end. That's the 10-year forecast, and then the average is the last bar on the right. And this looks at revenues versus spending. Spending is the total, Revenues are the bars inside the total. And then the top, which I'll talk about in a second, the top line is how much of the POMV draw you need to close the gap, to balance the budget, at least in terms of
Wait a
left
second.
and right.
Wait a second. That number and that whole thing, that never drops below 82%, or 81%. What's the deal here?
Well,
spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I'll get there in a second. But if you look at FY25 on the left hand side, the dark blue is traditional revenues at the projected oil price levels that we now see out there, that they're going to be in the 10-day period. The gold or the yellow is the portion of the POMV draw that's designated for government. That is, under the statute, is set aside for government. The red is the amount of additional POMV draw you have to use if you don't have alternative revenues. The amount of the additional POMV draw, or put differently, the amount of the PFD cut you have to make to match the spending. Spending on the left-hand side is the FY25 number, and that is $5.53 billion. That's the amount appropriated for FY25 when they left the building, or when the governor signed the bill this summer. The FY26 and additional numbers are just FY25 adjusted by 2.5%. It's just to account for inflation. All those numbers are just increases of over the prior year of 2.5%. That doesn't account for any significant spending increases. That's just adjusting the current spending for inflation. And as you can see, what's going on is that the dark blue, the traditional revenues, are below, because oil prices are below. The dark blue, the traditional revenues are below where they were forecast in the last 10-year forecast, and below where they were forecast in the spring revenue forecast. And that's creating an additional deficit. I mean, when you take the bottom out, which is essentially what traditional revenues are, when you take that bottom out, or when that bottom drops, something else has to fill the gap that's remaining. And what's filling the gaps is increased revenue, increased PFD cuts. And so between the gold and the red, between the portion of the POMV draw that's specified by statute for government, and the red, the additional portion of the POMV draw that has to be diverted to government, spending to close the gap, you're pulling now something like 80%. 80, as Michael said, the bottom number is 81% across that time frame. The average is 84%. You're pulling 84. You're having to pull 84% of the POMV draw to government to balance the budget. Recall that the Senate has said their plan now, or their approach, is 25-75, 25% to the PFD, 75% to government. Well, that goes out the window, because you can't balance the budget if you don't have alternative revenues. You can't balance the budget on POMV 25-75. It's got to be even more than that. It's got to be POMV 84 averaged over the 10-year period, 84-16, in order to balance the budget through PFD cuts alone, the leftover PFD approach. So we're not facing a good outlook at all, even where we are, even at the FY25 budget, just adjusted for inflation going forward. We're at significant deficits that if you only use PFD cuts, take us well below POMV 25-75.
Right. No, I mean, we're literally at 17% of the POMV being used for the PFD. Instead of 50%, it's 17% for fiscal year 25. Now, my question on this, before we run out of time for this segment, on the the futures and the 10-year forecast. I mean, does this take into account how bullish the president is on American energy and Alaska specifically? I mean, is that because, I mean, again, we could see oil drop even further as more oil comes to market, as more exploration happens, as the president unlocks and unleashes more of this stuff. 73 might not be the bottom.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't take into account. It takes into account that drop as much as the futures market is taking that into account. So this is following, these numbers are following the futures market as it currently is during this 10-day forecast period. If the futures market is over projecting where oil prices are ultimately going to go as a result of additional production brought online, then this is over projecting. This is over projecting where revenues are going to be.
Right.
And remember, yeah, we've talked about this on the show before, but remember that increased production isn't helping us. Within this 10-year forecast period, production is projected to go up like by 35%. But oil revenues, state oil revenues, actually go down over that period. So,
well, and there's nothing to say that again, as this goes forward, I mean, oil could get into the $60-something range, and then that just exacerbates this problem like you've never even seen as it goes forward. And again, this accounts for no new spending, no BSA increase, no defined benefits, no royalty subsidies for the gas or anything else. This is just straight inflationary money right here. And you could see that basically, the PFD continues to slip away. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with Brad Keithley and number 2 right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break with Brad Keithley. I'm hiding my face here because I'm just looking at this chart and realizing how boned we actually are. I mean, this doesn't account for any additional spending. I mean, you adjusted it for inflation, but I know that there's a factor in there as well. There's ratchet effects that are baked into the budget that is like $100 to $150 million a year, and escalators for employment contracts and all this other kind of stuff. You didn't include, this is just the raw inflationary increase.
This is just taking the prior year's budget times 0.25% or 2.5% times the projection, the current projection of inflation. Yeah, it's not factoring in any additional programs. It's not factoring in any additional spending or other.
Right.
Other
so this is
inflation.
This is the rosiest projection, because this is inflation. If you add in another 150 million a year for the escalators, or I think Donna said, I think she agreed the other day that it was between 150 and 200 million, but let's just say 150 million a year every year on top of this. I mean, this is a 90% take of the POMV easily at that point when you start talking about with no additional spending.
Yeah, I mean, what's really going on here, Michael, is the storyline I think that people ought to focus on is the bottom is dropping. The traditional revenues are dropping. What's really driving this story, what's really driving that top percentage number in this take is that the bottom's dropping. And if we have spending on top of that, spending increases at the same time that the bottom's dropping, the traditional revenues are dropping from where they were projected to be. Yeah, I mean, you sort of have unlimited unlimited percentages that start showing up in terms of take from the POMV or PFD cuts. So it's just, I mean, all of this, the entire campaign in the fall, we'll get into this in the next segment, but the entire campaign in the fall was based on, we're going to spend more. We're going to have more programs. I can out Trump your program lowercase version of Trump, not the uppercase version of Trump. But I could out Trump your program by, with my additional program. That's the entire campaign of the fall. And what's happened is the bottoms dropped out.
Yeah, no, it was a chicken in every pot deal. That's what it was. It was the chicken in every pot deal. Everybody, you get a chicken, no matter who pays, doesn't matter. Everybody gets a chicken, vote for me. That's what the whole thing was. But looking at those charts and looking at those numbers, I mean, I'm dramatically reminded of Sean Parnell's budget in 2013, 2014. When they based the whole budget on $115 a barrel and the bottom dropped out, it went down to like 72. And they're like, well, what do we do? And that's when, of course, when we spent, billions of dollars out of the CBR to balance the budget, because we just couldn't possibly think about actually cutting the state budget. I mean, I don't know what happens at this point, Brad, other than the PFD gets completely eliminated. And then they come to you hat in hand to say, guess what? Pucker up, sugar lips. It's time. The free ride is over. It's time for you to pay your fair share.
Yeah, we've taxed middle and lower income Alaska families by taking away the PFD. We've cut the ability to live in Alaska for middle and lower income Alaska families by taking away the PFD. And now we're going to come to you and likely come with a regressive tax. I mean, top 20% is not going to want to pay. The oil companies aren't going to want to pay. Non-residents aren't going to want to pay. So, with a likely another regressive tax. People keep saying, well, I don't understand why people are leaving Alaska. Well, it's right here. I mean, you're taking away their ability to live, the economics of living in Alaska by focusing the tax, a heavy tax, because it's not broad-based, it's not spreading to everybody else, a heavy tax right on the very people who are leaving.
Yep. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Do me a favor. Share the show, will you? Wherever you're watching from, Rumble or YouTube or Facebook, share the show. Invite other people to get educated. Maybe we can do something. I can only hope. But Brad and I have only been talking about this stuff for 10 years. You'd hope that we can reverse the course on this and see where things go. All right, let's get back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, we're continuing with the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. And it is time for number 2 of the weekly top 3. Which is now that the election's been certified and we have kind of an idea of where the majorities are going, and we have all the campaign promises, and you get a chicken and you get a chicken and you get a chicken in your pot. Brad, what do you see? What's coming on?
Chaos. I mean,
chaos.
Well, let's look at it this way. The House is going to be in chaos anyway. I mean, if the House ends up at 21-19, which is 21 in the majority in this cobbled together majority that they call a bipartisan majority, because Chuck Kopp and Louise Stutes are Republicans somehow. They call a bipartisan majority. They've cobbled it together, and it's only got 21. If the Republicans, the other Republicans, hold together and they have 19, you've only got a bare majority in the first place. You've got a majority that is at the whim of any given member, almost at any time, and so that's not a real strong majority in the first place. You've got a governor who has exercised the veto pen sometimes, not nearly often enough, but has exercised the veto pen sometimes. So you've got this majority put together who may be able to pass some stuff, pass it through the Senate, but then you got the governor who hopefully will veto it if it causes a substantial increased spending. So you've got chaos set up already. You don't have a stable majority in the House. You've got a majority in the Senate, but it can't do much alone without the House in terms of passing positive legislation. And you've got a governor sitting up there who still claims to be a conservative, and and who would push back on increased spending. So that's sort of the recipe for chaos at the very beginning. And then you add on, you layer on this budget, or you layer on the 10-year forecast, and it's just going to increase the chaos even more. I mean, the entire fall, as we were saying during the break, the entire fall campaign was run on, I promise this increased spending, I promise this increased spending, I promise this increased spending, I promise increase K through 12, I promise increase defined benefits, I promise this, additional program, that additional program. And that sort of led up to an op-ed that was in the ADN this past couple of weeks by Bryce, Chuck Kopp, Louise Stutes, Neil Foster, Calvin Schrage, Andy Josephson, and Zach Fields, the leadership of the House coalition. The title of it is Alaskans Spoke, We're Listening and Acting. And it's just an outline of what they want to spend on. It's an outline of the increased spending that they say Alaskans voted for by electing them to the House. The problem is when they get there, there's not going to be the revenues to support it. And the revenues aren't there from the beginning. If you take POMV 2575 as the baseline, which is what a lot of these guys have said is the baseline. If you take POMV 2575 as the baseline, the revenues aren't there from the beginning for FY 26. The FY 26 revenues are the traditional revenues plus the portion of the POMV draws set aside by statute for government is 3.8 billion against a projected spending, just escalating FY 25 spending for inflation of 5.67 billion. So you've got a 1.9 billion deficit against what the statute gives you in terms of revenue right at the beginning. $1.9 billion deficit, more than 30% of projected spending.
And that's with no increases in and of itself. That's just the standard spending right now.
That's just status quo budget plus an adjustment for inflation is a $1.9 billion deficit. So, they're coming down there thinking they have a mandate, and maybe they do because voters didn't anticipate the kind of revenue drop that we're seeing. They think they're coming down there with a mandate for, increased BSA, for defined benefits, for other things that involve additional spending. They think they're coming down there with a mandate for that, but they got no revenues to pay for it within the constraints that they have. So, and nobody, sometimes I just don't understand. Nobody's talking about, alternative revenues. So they're leaving themselves. Chuck Kopp's out there talking about a balanced budget, which is the new code word for PFD cuts. Whenever you hear Chuck Kopp say balanced budget, or anybody in that majority say balanced budget, what they're really talking about is deeper and deeper PFD cuts, because that's the only way they've left themselves to balance the budget. So they're walking in the door with all these big aspirations in terms of spending, all these big commitments in terms of additional spending, with no revenue even to pay for the existing budget, with no revenue to pay for the existing budget adjusted for inflation, with all these commitments. It's chaos. And the governor, come on, Mike, you could do it. I know you could do it. The governor is set up, this revenue forecast is going to set the governor up to say, we can't afford it. Whatever you want to layer on, we can't afford it. You're going to have to either have to come up with alternative revenues, which you'll probably veto also. You're either going to have to come up with alternative revenues, or you're going to have to find spending cuts to offset the increased spending you want to do, which they can't do because everything's got a constituency, as we found out in 2019. So this session is set up for chaos. At the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of smoke, a lot of earnest discussion, a lot of earnest effort, a lot of, we want to do this, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to do it because there just isn't going to be the revenues there to support it, or they're going to have to take PFD cuts to a whole new level that they haven't taken them before, and start rationalizing why they've now broken through 25, 75, and and explain where the hell we're going next.
Well, and again, the one thing that you said early on in the election cycle is that, we need to ask the question of who pays, because that's not a question. I mean, yes, you're right. It was here. Everybody gets a chicken. Everybody gets a program. Everybody gets a spend, but nobody is talking about where the money's coming from. I mean, if you look at it as a percentile, and not to go back to number one too much here, but you were saying just in 2026, you're talking about a $3.8 billion in traditional revenues between the oil and the POMV draw and everything else. And that means a deficit of about $1.9 billion. But just as a percentage of the overall budget, that means that we are 38% deficit spending? I mean, 38% of our overall budget is deficit. I mean, that's madness.
Yeah, I think it's 33. If the numbers, I've got a chart that does that, so I can cheat on this sort of thing. But 33% in deficit. And think about this: the federal government runs about 25% deficits, 20 to 25% deficits. And so we've been closing those deficits through borrowing, running up the national debt. But even the federal government has deficits that sort of cap out between the 20 and 25% range. We're breaking into whole new territory with these deficits. And again, it's not that's even before increased spending. Those deficits aren't coming from increased spending. Those deficits are coming because the bottom's dropping, because because oil prices are dropping. And that's that's just that's going to be huge. I think the average deficit over the 10-year period is like 30%. 30% is how much of the budget is in deficit, and if we don't have alternative revenues, how much is going to have to be drawn from the PFD. I've got another figure here. I've calculated what the PFD cut is as a percent of the statutory PFD. That is how much they're cutting into the statutory PFD in order to close these deficits. And the average over the 10-year period is 73%. So it's huge. I mean, just think about this. The numbers, the billions that we're talking about that's going to be transferred out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families in terms of PFDs, the dollars that are going to be transferred out of their pockets over into government to help the government close the deficit that government's running are just huge. It totals up to something like $60 billion over the period. The transfer out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. Oh, that's not 60. It is about $20 billion. The amount that's going to be transferred out of the pockets of lower and middle income Alaska families over to government. And that's called a tax, Randy. I'm sorry.
Right.
Randy's going to, blitz out now, but that's called a tax. The amount that's going to be transferred out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families over to government is about $20 billion over the period. And people are going to say, oh no, God, we've got people leaving the state. We need to do something about it. We need to spend more for childcare. We need to spend more for this or that. We need to, build a whole bunch of new stuff to, have construction jobs. We need to, keep people here by spending more government money. Well, the only place that government money is coming from in the current revenue structure is out of the pockets of the very people who are leaving. And by spending more, building more, having more programs, you're taking more out of their pockets. And you're making the situation worse and worse and worse. You can see why we're in a death spiral. Yeah. Because we're taking money out of the pockets of the very people that you're trying to keep. You're making their lives economically, you're making their lives worse.
So make me some predictions here based on the fact that we have this super thin majority in the House and this kind of, it's a Democratic, it's not even bipartisan. It's got 2 Republicans in it. The rest of them are Democrats, but they're going to try and say it's a bipartisan, I don't know, coalition or whatever. But so what do you think happens? Does this stuff get passed? Does Does somebody come to their senses and go, whoa, wait a second, we're already in deficits? What, you got any predictions for what we're going on?
It's going to be a blame game, and they're going to try to blame the governor. They're going to pass fiscally irresponsible legislation. They're going to pass legislation we can't afford. They're going to make the state's economic situation worse. They're going to make the economic situation of middle and lower income Alaska families, which they claim they're doing all this for. They're going to make their economic situation worse by deepening PFD cuts. They're going to pass all this, and they're going to say we fulfilled the mandate we had out of the fall election, and they're going to leave it to the governor to veto it, which hopefully he does. I mean, hopefully Mike has a spine, at least on this issue. Hopefully they're going to leave it to the governor to veto it, to bring it back to fiscal reality. And then they're going to blame him. They're going to say, we tried to do all this. But in the end, we couldn't do it because the governor's anti-kid, or the governor's anti-education, or the governor's anti-public employee, or whatever the hell they're trying.
Well, this is where the messaging for the governor needs to be very clear. I mean, he needs to chart it out in a simple chart that says, here's where our spending is, here's where the revenues are, and here's why I vetoed it, because it would eliminate the PFD and institute taxes in X number of years. That's what I mean. Put it in one simple chart. Here's where it is. The X and the Y curve. There you go. This is why I vetoed it, because we can't afford it.
If the governor had a good communications group, or governor had a good strategy group, he would do that at the beginning. He would do that from the very start and say, we can't afford this. We have put ourselves in a position where we can't afford this, and we've taken too much already from the backs of middle and lower income Alaska families. We've taken too much already from the backs of the people that we're trying to retain to get where we are. We can't afford it anymore. So if you want to do this, legislature, if you want to go through and pass all this stuff, if you want to waste all your time doing that, do it. But we can't afford it. And if he really had a good messaging operation with him, he would say that from the very beginning, so that he doesn't get stuck at the end. After they pass all this stuff, doesn't get stuck at the end being the bad guy. He ought to be the adult in the room from the beginning.
Yeah.
Talking about this stuff.
Like I said, this is where it's key that he gets a good messaging campaign, which he's not been great at. It's unfortunate. He has not been good at. But if he puts one person in there that can create a simple chart and shows it up and say, this is what we're talking about, and this is why I vetoed it. It's not because I hate children and puppies. It's because we simply can't afford it. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. AKLNG is our topic. Up next.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. They've been talking in the chat room about, leaving the state, who's leaving the state, kids are leaving the state, all this other kind of stuff. I'm thinking about leaving the state. I mean, that's the problem, is that it gets to that point where people are like, I can't, it just doesn't make any sense. My dollar's not going any further. The inflation's hitting us. This is hitting us. That's hitting us. No more PFD, and maybe potentially new taxes. And the government has become the economic driver of the whole state.
Yeah. Well, it's, we have slowly worked our way into this mess. And the fall wasn't any better. I mean, the fall was, I can spend more than you can spend. Ben Carpenter's, we're going to look back on Ben Carpenter and think, oh, this guy really actually understood what was going on. I mean, Ben Carpenter has tried to create a link between the economy, the private economy, and the way government thinks about issues. He's tried to create a system that would lower the burden on middle and lower income Alaska families, on working Alaska families, working age Alaska families. Proposed all that stuff, had it out there, but oh no, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do any of that. We just need to spend more. That's our solution. We just need to spend more. We need to spend more on K through 12. We need to spend more on our special interests. And so we've ended up in this situation where, we've made ourselves very, very, very dependent on the continuation of the baseline, the continuation of oil revenues as one piece of continuing the direction that we're going. And with that falling out, with that baseline starting to fall off, with oil prices starting to drop off, you're seeing what that exposes. You're seeing that, that we can't support the kind of spending levels that we've built up, or if we do, it's at the expense of the very people we're trying to retain, that we start taking more and more money out of their pockets.
Well, if we had a more of a traditional revenue model in the state, as they had in every other state, there'd be no way that they could have a 30% deficit spend every year for the next 10 years moving forward, because the private economy wouldn't stand for it, because they would have to keep coming back to you instead of tapping into the PFD. I mean, it really truly is what Rob Myers and Ben Carpenter have been talking about, that disconnect between the public and the private economy. The private economy is just an afterthought. I mean, that's all it's become. I mean, really, this has become a governmental consumption engine. That's all the state of Alaska has become, is they are driving the economy with that government spend and the government employment and everything else. And the private economy is if anything, an afterthought.
Yeah, they're doing it by sucking more and more. I mean, Michael, I can't overstate this enough. That's why I've restated it repeatedly, I guess. But they're doing it by sucking more and more and more out of the very people, out of the very segment they say they're prioritizing. They're doing this. They're building additional government spending. They're building additional government programs by taking more and more and more out of the pocket of working Alaska families, working age Alaska families, middle and lower income Alaska families, the people that are leaving. And they're drilling the hole that those people are, that group is dealing with deeper and deeper and deeper in order to fuel this, additional growth. It's just, it's sort of numbing after a while, because I repeat it so much, but it's sort of numbing after a while how stupid this is. We're creating programs that we say we need to have in order to keep middle and lower income, or in order to keep working age Alaska families, working Alaska families. We need all these programs to keep them. And we're doing it by taking money out of those very pockets, focusing the entire burden of government on that very segment and taking money out of their pockets. It is the most stupid fiscal system we've got going.
Well, and making it more inefficient, because we know when the money leaves the private sector and goes into government hands, it doesn't turn as much, right? It doesn't have that reinvestment kick that it normally has in the private sector. I mean, money turns, 5, 6, 7 times in a private economy. It turns barely 1 if it's being spent by government, because it has built-in inefficiency. So you're taking monies from the people that you are purportedly trying to protect, and you're using it to spend it on them, but now it's being consumed in the process instead of just leaving it in their hands in the first place. It literally at the end ends up being about the control of it. We can control it.
Yeah. And that's all about to become worse, because when you look at what the 10-year forecast is going to tell us, when you look at what oil prices, what the futures market is telling us about oil prices, with oil prices going down, that's all going to become worse, because there is no other we've left ourselves with no other revenue source other than to dig the hole that we've put middle and lower income Alaska families into deeper and deeper and deeper.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We've got number 3 dead ahead. Ooh, baby. It's going to be an interesting one. We're talking about AKLNG and more. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yep, I'm a pain in the Michael Duke Show. Good morning, my friends. Thanks for coming in and joining us. It's the weekly Top 3 with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You can find them at AK4SB.com on the internet, or you can go argue with Brad on Twitter. He loves that, or X. He loves that.
Blue Sky. Now we talk on Blue Sky.
Oh, now you talk on Blue Sky. Is that another?
Well, all of them: Facebook, X, Blue Sky.
Oh, yeah, everything. Okay, I can't keep track of what all the cool kids are doing these days. All right, Brad, number 3. I had to laugh. I talked a little bit about this yesterday because it seemed like the editorial board of the ADN has been listening to the show, because they were basically all of a sudden parroting all the things that I've been saying, you've been saying, that this emotional tie to Alaska gas is not a fiscally responsible plan, and that we have to admit that it's just not going to. I mean, it was shocking that, I was like, wow, it's like somebody recapped all of our shows over the last, 10 weeks or something and wrote an editorial. Is something finally coming around? What's the deal on AKLNG?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the House Resources Committee held the old legislature, the legislature that's holding over until the new legislature comes in. The House Resources Committee from the old legislature held a hearing on Cook Inlet gas and on AKLNG. And it was, I think, for the purpose of letting them get their sales pitch out there, both of them, both those who still want to make adjustments to or royalty relief or whatever they want to do in Cook Inlet, and those who want to, go forward with the AKLNG project, the new phase 1 project. I think it was to let them make their sales pitch and to get that sales pitch out in front of the coming session, and to sort of lay a baseline and a groundwork. If the purpose of that was to build a groundswell for either of those proposals, I think it backfired. The hearing itself didn't get much attention. The only article I saw on it in the local press was an article up in the Fairbanks News Miner that was sort of a regurgitation of the presentations at the hearing. There wasn't anything, at least that I saw, in the Empire, the Juneau Empire, or in the Anchorage Daily News, or even in the Alaska Beacon, which tends to report on this stuff. The hearing was just sort of a dud in terms of the public reception of it, in terms of the public rebroadcast of it, if you will. But even more than that, the substance of the presentations, I thought, was pretty thin. It seems like, just taking it from that hearing, it seems like those who've been pushing for Cook Inlet relief are just sort of, they're going to their fallback position now of, let's just help out Blue Crest. Let's just help out the Cosmopolitan project by giving them royalty relief and, shoveling money down their throats from loans from ADA and other things. That's the project we want to get off the ground. And most of it was spent on, how do we make Blue Crest, how much government support can we possibly throw at them in order to make them economic. That seemed to be the pitch for the Cook Inlet. The AKLNG project, the pitch seemed to be, how much government support, how many obvious subsidies and how many hidden subsidies do we have to throw at the AKLNG project in order for it to get a delivered price that looks somewhat like what we're going to say is the imported LNG price. And basically what they did was, and I've done this myself in presentations over time, what you do is you pick a price, and this is the price I've got to say is the price we're going to have. And then you just sort of back into, how many subsidies do I have to throw at it? And how many good assumptions do I have to make to get to that price level, to make it look good? And that sort of seemed to be the AKLNG pitch. The problem is that the world LNG market is running away from that. The world LNG market is going down. They picked a price point of about $13 or $11 or $12, somewhere in that range. They layered it on with as many subsidies as they needed to get to that price point, to get to the $12 price point. and said that's competitive with imported LNG. And so there's all these other great benefits of having constructed this project, having funneled a bunch of money out the door, basically to non-resident contractors. There's all these other benefits to having done that. And we're competitive with the price. So, pick us. Problem is the world LNG market, as we show in our Monday charts. We do a Monday chart that looks at the futures market for LNG. Problem is the world LNG market is dropping as additional gas supplies come on the market. And as additional LNG projects come on the market, the world LNG price is dropping. And so the price point they picked starts standing out like a sore thumb as not a competitive price point. So it was a pretty underwhelming, frankly, project. And the response to that, even though the ADN didn't run an article on the hearing itself, the ADN ran an editorial this weekend talking about the project, and the headline, as you noted, is "Time's up for Alaska natural gas pipe dreams." It's time to give up on LNG. Time to package it up. There is one sentence, Michael, that you probably picked up on yesterday, but I picked up on. It was, yes, we need to close it down, and yes, we need to stop the spending, but it's not so we can save. It's not so we can balance the budget.
So we can spend it on other things. Yeah,
exactly. The next to last sentence was, the small but meaningful sum saved could be put toward many other state services that find themselves short on funding. So yeah, we got this budget that shows these huge deficits, but by gosh, we don't want to back off on spending on anything, even this thing we don't need. We don't want to back off spending on that. We want to spend it on something else. The other article, Tim Bradner did an article in the Frontiersman, which I really liked. The headline of it is "Grab Your Pocketbooks, Energy Costs Will Rise," and it's talking about, even with AKLNG, that energy costs, gas costs, are going to go up significantly. And Tim, at the end of the article, Tim had something that I think probably it certainly is correct from a factual standpoint, but probably as people realize this, will put the final nail in the coffin of this proposal. A slimmed down version of this involving only the pipeline from the slope and delaying the LNG plant would still cost 10 to 14 billion. This is beyond the ability of consumers in the interior and South Central Alaska to pay. However, the only alternative is for the state to provide the funding, and the state's only realistic source of funds is the Alaska Permanent Fund. So as you strip these layers of the onion away, and as you get down to the core of, okay, let's say we wanted to go forward with this, where's the dollars going to come from? Then 10 to 14 billion dollars. Assuming you could actually find public debt at a cost that the project could afford, you'd really only need to come up with about $2.5 to $3 billion of that in terms of equity. The rest of it could be financed by debt. The problem with that, though, frankly, is that the debt cost that they've assumed to get to this $12 delivered price is below market. So you'd probably have to subsidize the debt too. And so we're talking about, just a big transfer from the permanent fund. And I think that's the point at which people will rebel. They'll say, oh no, that you're asking for too much. When you ask for, transferring dollars from the permanent fund into this project, into this highly risky project, you're asking for too much. One other note on the highly risky part. When you look at, and this is the thing that really, I think should trouble people a lot, whether it will or not. When you look at declining LNG prices, declining global LNG prices, this thing could end up, the pipeline could end up being a white elephant for Alaska. We could spend all this money on it. We could build it, get to the $12 price point, and then find that the world market for LNG is $6. And so we've got, what we've done is we spent $10 billion to get us an uneconomic energy cost. Right.
And that only we are using, and we're paying more than market value than if we just imported the gas in and of itself. It's painful. It's painful to watch. We've been talking about this for a while. We've got to divorce the emotion on this deal, and we need to get cracking on the importation of LNG. And there's a variety of ways you can do that, but it's crazy stuff. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Brad, thanks so much for coming on board, and beating us this morning.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me, and congratulations again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, folks, we have more coming up. Hour 2 instead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Be kind, love one another, live well. Yeah, I mean, at this point, even if we got started today on the importation of LNG, we're still talking about what, 4 years, 5 years to get everything stood up in importing it, or is that a shorter road? Because I know they said if they started a pipeline, it wouldn't be the shortest. It would be 2031.
Yeah.
So
it's shorter for imported LNG. It's I mean, the only kit that you either require a rehab of the Kenai LNG plant, the existing Kenai LNG plant, or you require some work to create a dock for a floating gas for a floating LNG facility where you can regasify the gas, import and regasify the gas.
Point Mac or someplace,
yeah. And that is shorter time frame. I mean, you've got some permits that you've got to go through for both of those, which may take some time. But in the Trump administration, probably a shorter time period, and hopefully, done well so they withstand court attack. But you've got to go through some permitting, but it's a shorter time period. The floating LNG, or the LNG project, sort of matches up well, if we start it now, matches up well with the point at which Cook Inlet production declines to the point that we need additional supply. And the floating LNG timeline matches up well with that. Another problem with the AKLNG project is it's about 3 or 4 or 5 years too late to that point. So what the hell do you do in the meantime?
Yeah.
And that's why people, frankly, are so focused on Cosmopolitan, because they think that's the answer in the meantime from the Cook Inlet standpoint. But it may not be either, because it's got to have a bunch of permits also, and a bunch of investment to go forward. So it's floating LNG. I mean, the reason that that the utilities are now sort of resigned to and talking about floating LNG or the LNG imports is because that's about the only thing that's going to match the time frame in which we're operating.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficult thing, because we're projected to start to see that drop in 27, something like that. Yeah. So it's we've only got a couple 3 years to get it all together, and whether we put it down in at the Marathon plant in Nikiski, or whether we put it on a floating platform on Point Mac or whatever, it's got to be it's something's got to happen.
But that's going to add to the chaos. That's going to add to the chaos in the legislature as well, because we have at least the new representative from the North Slope, who's going to be co-chair of House Resources, has said, we need that pipeline. That what we need to do is to do the AKLNG project, and so they're going to spend part of the session, part of their time, trying to justify going after that pipeline. And Representative Dybert, who's from Fairbanks, and would like to be able to say that they're bringing North Slope gas down to Fairbanks through a pipeline, is the other co-chair, and she's likely going to be part of that as well. So they're going to burn time, add to the chaos of going down the track of trying to sell that program when it's unsellable. And and the administration, Dunleavy's out there saying that's Dunleavy's spend, right? The Democrats want to spend on K through 12, and they want to spend on defined benefits. Dunleavy wants to spend on energy, on pipelines, and on royalty relief for the Cook Inlet. And the Dunleavy administration is pushing the pipeline. So, it's going to add to the chaos of this coming session we don't have money to spend, but hey, we all want to spend it on different things. So let's just all spend it on everything. And
this is the modus operandi of the legislature. Just, the hard questions and just kick the can down the road. Just sit there and spin and study it and look at it and talk about it and debate it, and then adjourn, and then come back the next year and do the same thing. This is exactly what they've done for decades in this state.
Yep. Yeah. And the foolishness of that is will be revealed, I think, by the 10-year plan, as the bottom drops out of the oil revenues. The foolishness of saying, we can do all this stuff, we can spend it on all this stuff, we can have these big capital budgets, we can do the $10 billion. It's just all the foolishness of that's just going to be overwhelming. I mean,
How long until we're faced with this though, Brad? How long until it's so obvious to everybody that even those who are in the legislature have to go, we can't. I mean, is it inevitable, or do we have to get these people out? I mean, do they just live in their own little bubble, or does it inevitably come up and slap them like a dead fish in the face?
oh, they do live in their own little bubble. That's for damn sure. And they'll try to, I mean, the real interesting thing to me as I look forward is how they're going to try to rationalize moving away from 2575. How they're going to try to rationalize moving away from POMB 2575, because they're going to have to do that. Even to balance this year's budget, they're going to, the FY25 budget, they're going to have to, think about doing that. And they're certainly going to have to do it as they think about FY26 and 27 and beyond. And I don't know, they're going to try to, they'll try to rationalize it, and they'll try to keep going, but we're going downhill fast in terms of revenues.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch. Brad Keithley, anything else? What are we looking at for this next week? What are you watching?
Oh, we're probably 2 weeks out. We're probably not going to get the 10-year forecast and the budget this week, so it'll probably be next week. But I'll be focused on getting ready for that, I suppose.
I suppose. He sounds so excited about it. I suppose you've already gotten the sneak peek, and now you're like, oof, this is going to be so painful. It'll be interesting to see how they spin it compared to what you've got up there, and to see what the forecast, how truthful are they going to be? How optimistic are they going to be? Because that'll tell us something too, right there. If they get into that whole Sean Parnell 115 versus $73 a barrel kind of scenario, we'll know exactly where things are going.
Well, this is the governor's chance to spin, so he better start from the beginning, or else he's going to be behind the eight ball the entire way through.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week, folks.
Michael, thanks for having me,
folks. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast. Welcome to the party, pal. The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, from beautiful Homer, Alaska. We are on top of the world down here, and we're ready to go with hour 2 of this big Tuesday show. If you're just joining us and you missed yesterday's announcement, yes, we have moved the home base down here to Homer, and we are we're ready to kick things off and rock and roll. We bought the radio stations down here, and we're getting ready to do some transferring and creating. And the next 5 weeks are going to be very interesting. Let's put it that way. It's going to be very, very busy here the next 5 weeks. On the plus side, it is 32 degrees here and nice and warm. Although now we're talking about freezing rain. We'll talk about the weather alerts here across the state in just a moment. Wanted to welcome you back to the program, and thank you for being part of it today. We really appreciate you coming in every morning and hanging out with us and enjoying some discussions. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and it's not good. It's not good. It's not good. Let's just put it that way. Looking at the potential 10-year forecast here for the state of Alaska, the numbers that Brad just put up, and I'm going to throw them up on my screen here real quick, just for those of you who are just joining us or missing. But Brad just put together the 10, because the 10-year forecast, the revenue forecasts are based on oil futures markets, and so they do a 10-day window of where the futures markets are going. And Brad has put together a potential 10-year forecast. The governors will probably be out maybe next week. But he's looking at it, and it's not good, folks. It's not great. $1.72 billion deficit in fiscal 2025, 1.87 in fiscal year 2026. And it just gets worse. I mean, as you go through to 2030, we're a $2 billion deficit. And it just goes up from there with an average over a 10-year or an 8-year average of $1.85 billion a year in deficit. And that means that the taking of the POMV, the taking of the dividend, never in the next 10 years, never drops below 81%. So again, 75-25, great, except for just next year alone, they're going to have to take 80 with no additional spending. No additional spending at all. If they left it alone and it just increased at a flat rate, they're talking about having to take, just in 2025 alone, 83% of the POMV draw, which means, you know, that's only 17%. It should be 50% for the PFD at the lowest, if you ignore the statute, which they're going to. But that means that instead of a 50% of the POMV draw going to the PFDs, 17% will go. And as Brad pointed out, they're going to, I mean, they said 75-25 was their fiscal plan. Remember? That's what Gary Stevens said. 75-25 is their fiscal plan. And as Brad pointed out, and as I pointed out with Brad, the numbers that he has here, these are the rosiest projections you can possibly think of. This is simply adjusting for inflation. I mean, if you actually put the automatic escalators and things like that in there, because the state, even if the legislature didn't meet for the next 3 years, the budget's still going to go up, just because there's, you know, 100, 150, $200 million a year that it just automatically escalates anyway. And so those numbers that we just went over in the last hour, and I was just showing here on the screen, those are the rosiest possible numbers. And that's, again, basing it on a projection of $73 a barrel oil. As President Trump comes in, we've talked about this, that the Trump presidency will be kind of a two-edged sword for Alaska. One, it will open us up for more resource development, which is great. But two, it also opens up the entire country for resource development, which puts more oil on the market, which drops the price. And that's a real problem, because our entire, a big chunk of our entire budget, somewhere close to 30% of it is based on that price of oil, which is why I have said time and time again that one of the reasons that I believe in the Charter of Changes, one of the things that we needed to do was change the funding. That was the fourth one of the Charter of Changes. And what I meant by that was that we need to factor the budget based on a 5-year rolling average of what our revenues were, instead of pretending that we know exactly what the markets are going to do next year. We know exactly where oil is going to be next year. We should be basing it on first a zero-based budgeting, and then basing it on a 5-year rolling average of revenues for the budget. That's something that we should that's just something we should be doing. And we're not. We're not. And it's a real problem. And yet here we are, we've elected another batch of people who, who basically just said, we'll give you anything you want. You like spending, we'll spend for you. There is no way to pay for all this with the current revenues. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. I mean, it is nutty. I mean, yesterday we were talking about that article from Veronica DeRuggi in Reason Magazine about the recklessness of Congress, the fiscal recklessness of Congress. But as Brad pointed out, I mean, we literally are in a 33% deficit every year moving forward. 30+% of our budget is in deficit moving forward. The federal government doesn't do it. I mean, it hasn't got that much. Now, in this case, at least, we're not borrowing the money. I mean, they're just taking it out of people's pockets and taking it out of the PFD. But at that point, at some point, that money will be gone too. There will not be enough left in the POMV draw to make all that work. I mean, I don't know how. Look, I'm bullish on Alaska. I would not have just come down here and started a new company and buying radio stations and doing. If I didn't believe in Alaska, I wouldn't do that. And I believe that there's a ton of opportunity. But we've got politicians that are so out of touch with fiscal reality in so many ways. I mean, we've been talking just about the budgets, but this whole discussion on AKLNG and the idea that somehow we need this gas line from the North Slope down to Tidewater, or at least a pencil line from the North Slope to Fairbanks to Matsu or something. I mean, but again, nobody is looking at the fiscal reality of how much does it cost and how do we get there? How do we make it pay? That's the problem. Would it be great to have Alaska gas? Absolutely. Is it a tragedy that there's, 17 trillion cubic feet of natural gas on the slope and we're struggling to get it down here? Yes, it's horrible. But we can't keep looking and building these pie in the sky ideas of, a natural gas pipeline that's going to cost, in the end may end up having gas at the other end that costs, 1.5 to 2 times what the market value is. I mean, it'll be like Brad said, a white elephant. It'll be a boondoggle. When the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, oil was discovered at Prudhoe and the Trans-Alaska Pipeline got started, man, the oil companies were flocking to Alaska because they saw a huge opportunity to get in early and to strategically place themselves and do all that. They were ready. They were throwing money at it. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, they were all about that. But nobody's jumping at this quote unquote opportunity to do the same thing with Alaska Gas because it doesn't they have to answer to their shareholders. They couldn't build a pipeline that would produce gas that was at, 1.5 to 2 times what the global market will probably be. And that's the major problem. So we've got these politicians who live in a land of nice to have, theoretical, whatever, but the reality is just lurking around the corner, ready to slap us in the face. The reality is here. And the reality is we can't continue to spend at the rate that we're spending right now. We are starting this next fiscal year, just based on what Brad threw out there, with a $150 million, $180 million shortfall. Lower than what they had projected in the original budget. And again, that means no supplemental budget. So whatever they overspend on this year, there's going to be no supplemental budget without going into deficits. And the overall deficits, just tying everything to the rate of inflation of 2.5%, means $1.8 billion in the hole before we even get started. How can they walk around? How can they walk around and go, well, we'll get you a new BSA. We'll get you a new BSA. We'll get you a defined benefits program for all you state employees, the 40 whatever thousand between the university and the other state employee. We'll get you all your defined benefits. We'll create royalty relief for the Cook Inlet and everything else, but it doesn't cost us any money, right? Oh, it doesn't cost us any money. We're just not, but it does, because the revenue that would have come in has to be offset by something else. We have such a dearth of revenue options in this state that there's only a couple levers they can grab. They're not going to be willing to take a look at the oil tax revenue, which even Brad, as an oil and gas guy, has admitted there's $400 or $500 million still left there on the table that we could be collecting there. They're not going to look at anything else. It's so astonishing just to watch and look at from the outside. And these people just look at you and they go, oh, it'll be fine. Don't worry. Again, too big to fail. This is the too big to fail problem. We have the same problem at the national level that we were talking with Nick Begich with yesterday. It's just we're too big to fail. It's madness. It's absolute unfettered madness at this point. All right. Well, we're coming up on the break. I got a couple other stories to talk about, and we've got some weather alerts for the state of Alaska that we will be discussing as well. So we will continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
I love this. Brian says, the too big to fail Alaska edition. Yeah. I mean, that's, Rick said over on YouTube, they walk around because the people in their district have no idea what they're doing. Well, I mean, that's true. There is, again, low propensity voters or voters who really aren't paying attention to the overall scheme of things. But it's, at some point, and again, this is part of the problem with Alaska, being so different from every other state, because at some point the taxation on people at some point would have been like, whoa, wait a second. You have to answer to why the taxes are going up. Well, you have to answer to why we have more deficit spending. Now, I know people go, well, what's going on in California is the same thing. Yeah, but people are fleeing California and they're having to come to grips with it as well. I mean, I just don't even know. Or Terry says, don't care. Let the state take care of me. I mean, don't think that they wouldn't want to cradle to grave, have control of everything. That, they would love that. They would love that. Harold says he needs a fruitcake for Christmas. Oh, there's so many things I could say to that, but I do love me a good fruitcake. I know it's a meme, but I do love me a good fruitcake. Brian says, are we seeing a pattern here? DC, Juneau, Sacramento, Springfield. The list is long. The state is not your friend. That's true. A cut in the PFD, says Randy, does not take money out of people's pockets. It simply puts less free money into people. Is there a discernible difference between the outcome of those two things, Randy? It's not free money, by the way. It's your money. But I mean, even if it is free money, the outcome, is there any discernible difference in the outcome, whether it takes it out of people's pockets or simply doesn't put it in there? What's the outcome in the end, Randy? What's the outcome? Bill says, you all know what? I owe everybody a huge thank you. If we didn't send him all those stars, none of his radio station dreams would have been possible. That's true. That is true. The stars that show up, every little bit helps. I mean, I think the most I've ever received is $20, but you know what? It's a $20 well spent. That was what it was. Terry is apparently in Facebook jail. She says, I'm in trouble with Facebook. She can't get on Facebook. They won't let her on because, well, she said something. Cindy, back a little bit ago, said, without strong, consistent leadership willing to make and implement hard changes, nothing will ever change. The writing has been on the wall. Yeah, I mean, and we saw that with the Ben Carpenter thing, right? I mean, not only was he trying to be a leader and lead on this thing and bring all the information and do everything that the problem is that the people just didn't buy into it. They don't see the problem. And they bought Bjorkman's his chaff. Rick said during our discussion with Brad, he said, both of you used the term we and weave. I don't think weave had much to do with it. I think, how about certain legislators? Okay, certain legislators. But admit it, it's the powers that be in the legislature. We put somebody good in there like a Ben Carpenter or a Rob Myers or a Mike Shower or, whoever. And yet the people who are holding the reins of power, who are pulling the strings, they're the ones that are taking us down this road. The business as usual crowd. You are correct, MD, beating a dead horse. Yeah, I am beating a dead horse. But, I mean, I guess if I didn't, I would feel like I was shirking my duty. If I didn't keep pointing out the hard, cold facts, I would be shirking my duty. He said duty. All right, let's get back to it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay. We're continuing on. We have got one more segment before we're joined by Chris Story, where he's going to come in and give us a weekly life coaching lesson. My neighbor, Chris Story. I can say that now. I mean, he's not like real close, but he's a few minutes away. Because here we are, broadcasting from beautiful, scenic, subtropical Homer, where it's 32 degrees and apparently going to be raining a little bit here today. Which reminds me, I guess I should get over to the weather alerts for the whole state of Alaska. Things are apparently icy and snowy up in Fairbanks. I should mention that horrible accident out on Chena Hot Springs Road yesterday. Man, 2 people died, 7 people injured, 2 of them critically. I hope, I guess thoughts and prayers. I don't know who it was, but man, it's a rough time out there. It's a tough place to be out there in Chena Hot Springs. That road can get nasty sometimes. But winter weather advisories in effect for big chunks of the state. In the Anchorage municipality, freezing rain expected. They're expecting an accumulation of light glaze from 6 a.m. this morning to 3 a.m. tomorrow. So if you can remote work, probably today would be a day to remote work. Light freezing rain and drizzle expected to develop all throughout the morning. Same thing in the Matsu borough from Houston, including Houston and Big Lake, all the way out KGB side, that whole thing. Same thing, light freezing rain and drizzle expected to develop this morning. Travel conditions are going to be tough. And then here in the Kenai Peninsula borough, same thing. 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. this time. Light freezing rain and drizzle expected to develop this morning and continue through the day into tonight. Temperatures will rise above freezing by Wednesday morning, but rain can still freeze when hitting the cold road and sidewalk surfaces. Well, it's already raised up here on top of the ridge, but it is, yeah, it's gonna be slippery. I'm almost busted my head yesterday. It's like this ice is like, wow. So be cautious out there. Be cautious out there. Be careful. Don't go too fast. And if you can work from home, probably not a bad day to work from home today. I'm just throwing that out there. Probably not a bad day to work from home if you can today. All right. What else we got? Well, the recount of the ranked choice voting is about to kick off. 737 votes was the final count, which makes it 0.22%. That's how close it was. 0.22, 49.89% to 50.11%. Now, that was slightly bigger than the unofficial results, where the margin was supposed to be 664 votes. But they're going to go ahead and do a recount. And they're not going to do a hand recount. They're using 6 high-speed Dominion scanning machines. Now, these are not machines that are connected to the internet. These are simple tabulation machines that read the face of each ballot. And then a picture of each ballot will be displayed to a group of observers who are allowed to witness the recount, and they can challenge any ballot that they see on the scanner. And then the division's attorney will determine whether to accept the vote as legitimate. 727 votes, though, out of 300,000, nearly 300,000 votes. That's not a lot. It's not a lot. Back in 2020, Lieutenant Governor Kevin Meyer had ordered an audit of ballot measure 2, the ranked choice voting, when it was actually going on to the books. And the audit was conducted as a hand count of all the ballots cast in that year. He said he did it as a hand count just to assure the folks that you can trust the machine. They'd gotten a contract with Dominion. They'd done it all. And the difference between the hand count and the machine count was 24 votes out of, again, close to 300,000 votes. So we'll see where it goes from here. But right now, it's expected it's going to take 10 full days to do the recount. She said roughly 20 state election workers will count ballots for 12 hours a day. Doesn't that sound like fun? 12 hours a day. We're going to count ballots today, folks. Here you go. I don't really expect this to move very much. But again, 0.22%. That's the difference. And it just shows you what money can buy. Because the ranked choice repeal people were outspent over 100-1. And so this just shows you what money can buy. That's 737. Like I said yesterday, I have talked to at least 5 or 6 people who said, "Oh, I thought I was supposed to vote no on that. Wasn't that that I don't want ranked choice?" So I say no. You say yes to repeal it. I mean, a lot of confusion. I could idiot. I mean, I could just look at the eye and go, "Idiots, you should read." But I didn't. I was polite. But dang, why don't you read it before you vote? Why don't you take 5 minutes before you vote to figure it out? But we'll see what's going on. But so we should have in 10 days. It starts tomorrow, which will be the 14th, it'll be the 4th. So hopefully by the 14th, the recount will be done. But I fully expect that this number will probably hold, and probably the gap will shrink slightly, but it's a long way to reach, especially based on that hand recount back in 2020, where there was a difference of just 24 votes. So we'll see. We'll see what happens when that goes on there. The Anchorage Assembly finally had a good idea. 3 members of the Anchorage Assembly have introduced a new proposed ordinance that would let voters decide if they would like to shift their local elections from April to November, which, I mean, this has been a huge push all over the place, right? I mean, this has been a huge push in various areas where they want to consolidate all the elections on a. Can we just get them all to happen at one time? So I don't have to have a municipal election in April or October or September or November. Can we just get them all on the same sheet of music? I didn't realize how much it costs to run an election in Anchorage. The average cost of a municipal election in Anchorage, and they happen every year. Elections in Anchorage happen every year because they're running 3-year terms instead of 4 or 5-year terms. The average cost per municipal election was $682,000 on average, with the high years being the mayor's races because they usually have to have a runoff election because nobody gets a plurality. And so, $750,000 a year every year. So the proposal would not only align the elections from April to November, they would also make them happen every other year instead of every year. And it would said the ordinance says it would reduce the municipal election cost by 50%, and resulting in an estimated savings of about $340,000 a year, $1.3 million over a 4-year period. But there are those who are not fans. The chair of the assembly, Chris Constant, is quoted here saying it's not a fan. He said it's a perennial. This is the attitude in this state, the condescension. It's a perennial cause for certain factions in this community. It's a perennial. It just makes sense, Chris. Now, he does make a valid point when he said local candidates, if the change happened, local candidates would be buried beneath splashier state and federal races. Well, but I mean, would they really? I mean, yeah, maybe they wouldn't get as much airplay. Maybe they would be overwhelmed by the 47 mailers in the mailbox or whatever else that they got from all these other candidates. Maybe it would struggle to fund, but maybe it would also take some of that money out of those politics. It may be, it's a thing, but I would, I would just, of course, the one thing he did like about the proposal was changing the local terms in office from 3 to 4 years. Of course he did. You get to stay in power for 1 more year. I'm in favor of that. Of course you are. But there you go. So that's going to come up. We'll see what happens. It's open for public testimony on the meeting on December the 17th. But I mean, I think it's a step I think all the elections in the state ought to align on the same day so that everybody knows exactly what's going on. And finally, before we go here, that trial for Gabrielle Ledoux, ooh, baby, mistrial. A hung jury resulted in a mistrial on Monday. And reading some of the facts of the case, I could see as why this was a hard case for them to try and decide, because they have to prove that Gabrielle Ledoux knew that her 2 assistants, or her assistant and her son, were not intending to stay in the area that they registered in, District 18 or District 15. I'm sorry. They would have to prove that she didn't know a certain thing, and that's a pretty tough road to hoe. No word as to whether or not this will come back or be retried or whatever else, but it's a tough situation. They were deadlocked and couldn't get around. So mistrial's declared. I guess we'll see where this goes from here. 4 years in the making, and they got the mistrial. They got the mistrial like right away. It's pretty crazy stuff. All right, we got to go. More, don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with Chris Story right after these messages.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. I didn't win anything in the auction, said Frank. Well, you got to bid more. That's the thing. You got to bid more. Of course, you could have just bought all that buy it now stuff, right? Sorry. Oh my God. Randy, you're being so pedantic, man. The outcome is that not putting free money in my pocket is not a tax on money they earn. The outcome is accuracy of the definition of tax. So pedantic. Holy cow. You're missing the forest for the trees. That's what I'm saying there. Terry says, this is why I'm not a fan of YouTube. Chat isn't interactive like Facebook. I mean, it's a different kind of chat for sure. And there's fewer people. I don't even know how many people are on YouTube right now. I could tell you. 17 people on YouTube right now. But I can, it's not as interactive. That's for sure. All right. No bathroom breaks. Let's see. A hung jury. Yep. Elon Musk launched a rocket in Texas and landed in India, and we still don't have election results. I mean, yeah. Hello, Rick. Rick's over on Rumble too. Rick's everywhere this morning. He's over on Rumble. The ballot needs to be verified that the voter is actually legal to vote. I mean, I would hope that that's not what a recount does. A recount just counts the ballots. I mean, if there's a concern about the process, about whether or not they were an actual, that's a whole different part of the pie there, So we need to get in on that and figure that out. Okay. Let me make a phone call here, see if we can get Mr. Story on the line. Hey, look at that. It actually works.
Morning, Michael.
Good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Worked on the first time. That's nice.
Worked. I always love it when it works on the first time. Yeah, my bud. It is just another beautiful day in paradise here. 33 degrees. You never told me that you got into the subtropical weather down here.
Oh man, I've been telling you for years. It's the banana belt of Alaska. It's fantastic.
Yep. No, things are good. Things are good. You right? What are we talking about today?
The future is all in your head.
Well, that is true. The future is in my head. It's all I think about right now. It's all I think about is the future. But you got to think the right way about it. Okay, good. How was your turkey vacation break?
Oh, very nice. Of course, I don't have the luxurious vacation that you take an entire week. But that was nice. It was a nice couple of days and very relaxing. And of course, it's weird because my birthday is usually not so close in proximity to Thanksgiving as it was this year. So that was an unusual sort of turn of events.
Well, happy birthday.
Two magnanimous days that close together. It's weird.
Earth almost spun off its axis. It was so weird. That's really.
Yeah, I tell you. I mean, and that's am I responsible for the pardon? No. But was it sort of a cataclysmic turn of events that I was part of? Maybe. The stars aligned, and the fact that Chris Story had a birthday near Thanksgiving caused everything to tug in a certain direction. And Joe Biden said, "Sure, I'll just change my mind. No big deal." I think my favorite reaction so far has been from Jon Stewart on the Daily Show. Did you watch that?
I did not. Take on I did not. No, what did he say?
Oh man, he did this great impression of Hunter and said, "I'd like it to include, for the 11 years of crimes he may have committed over the last 11 years, including this next upcoming New Year's Eve.
Right.
It's gonna get wild.
It's gonna get wild. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I mean, it's kind of unprecedented, not just for your gun crimes, your tax evasion crimes, your drug crimes, whatever, but for anything that you may have done in a 10-year window. That was like, wow. That's Anyway, kind of crazy stuff. Oh, are you ready for the holidays? Christmas madness? What do you?
Yeah. No, I look forward to it. I'm not one of those that gets stressed. I enjoy shopping on New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve, to be honest. I enjoy that. It doesn't bother me, and I don't get worried about what I haven't done. I enjoy the whole process. It doesn't bother me.
Good for you. Good for
No
you.
stress.
All right, my friend. Well, we're going to jump into it. Here we go. Chris Story is our guest. The future is all in your head. I have to talk about something real quick before we get to Chris, though. So stick around with us. Don't go anywhere. Back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y stuff and everything. Let's get to it. Here we go. All right, before we get into our weekly pick-me-up with Chris Story, our life coaching lesson, I wanted to let you know about the 12 Days of Lotto. Lotto Alaska's got a free lottery going on. It's a free drawing. No purchase necessary. You can enter once per day between now and 10 a.m. on Christmas Day. It's open to everybody. Every entry is going to get 5 randomly generated numbers. And then they're going to start giving prizes away starting on the 14th of December. $1,000 a day. Every day from the 14th of December to Christmas Eve. And then on Christmas Day, one of those free numbers is going to get you a brand new Suzuki Quad King from Northern Power Sports in Fairbanks. So go check it out. It's great stuff. You can find it at lottoalaska.com. Again, no cost to you. It's just enter to win $1,000 a day for the 12 days of Lotto over at lottoalaska.com. It's kind of crazy stuff. All right. Chris Story joins us today to talk about not politics. We're talking about self-help, self-healing, self-care, and how to make your life better. Chris Story, the man from Homer, my neighbor. Hey, neighbor, how you doing?
Doing great. We're still in 2 different climates. You have to understand. The closer you get to the sea, the better it gets. I'm just saying for the ocean. You're still in a different climate frame. So let's just not get ahead of ourselves here. Although I guess you'd be closer to on top of the world than I am. So
I am on top of the world. I'm looking down on you from here.
Quick announcement, as per normal. And so it's interesting. So the states, the Lotto's giving away free money. What are they creating a new PFD?
Hey.
Anyway. I'll be here all week. And a big announcement. I'm so excited. On Friday, I'm going to be doing an art show at the Art Shop Gallery. 5-ish o'clock is when First Friday starts. Art Shop Gallery, I'll be having raku pottery. My brother is going to have his amazing photography. And my daughter actually is going to be showing her oil paintings, which are phenomenal. So hope to see everybody 6 o'clock, between 5 and 6 at the Art Shop Gallery on this coming First Friday, December 6th. Looking forward to that.
All right. Well, fantastic. I look forward to seeing what you got put together there. All right. So your topic for today in our self-help section of the show is the future is in your mind or in your head, or what exactly are we talking about here?
Your future is in your head, but also I think the future is we look at it collectively through the collective consciousness or subconscious of America, Alaska, whatever. You pick a group, pick an entity, pick a nation. It's up to you. What do you think about something is what it's going to become. Dr. Joseph Murphy studied human psychology for his entire career, and he wrote a great book. It ought to be in everybody's library. It's called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And in it, he outlines essentially your future is determined, not preordained. It's not predetermined. It is determined by what you think, how you think, your thoughts. So I have a plaque in my office. It's a quote from Norman Vincent Peale, and it says, "Change your thoughts, change your world." And I think you could go further and say, change the world, because collectively, how we think as a nation, and you hear people say all the time now, Michael, that, oh, it's never been more divided in this country, forgetting, of course, historical perspective of a civil war, or maybe going back to one of the villages that Genghis Khan had pillaged and raped and burned and subjugated. I mean, there has been other times in human history where we've been this divided, but for some reason we have this collective perspective that has never been like this, because of the constant hyper awareness of that computer in your hand that brings in that division right to your heart and soul every single day, sometimes many multiples of a day, depending on how often you check social media or watch a 24-hour news cycle. So how you think is going to determine your future. Your future state of being is determined by your current state of thinking.
I was having a conversation with my son about this the other day, as we were driving back to Wasilla to drop him off. And like I said, this is a computer. The thing between your ears is a computer, and what you focus on and what you think about is what your subconscious starts working on. And you're right, the subconscious is like the engine underneath the hood that you can't, it's kind of a sealed hood. You can't get in there. You can't check the oil. You can't do anything. All you can do is feed it stuff, and it works on it. And this is kind of what we were talking about. And I said, that's why you've got to watch what your thoughts are. And I struggle with that. I mean, especially in times of stress and strife. And I mean, you and I had a conversation last night where I'm like, man, I'm not, I got a million things going on, and it becomes more difficult sometimes to control it, but you've got to get a grip on it, because that is what your subconscious mind will nibble away on while you're sleeping, while you're reading a book, while you're watching TV, while your subconscious mind is constantly picking away at whatever you're feeding it. So you got to make sure you're feeding it good stuff. The old programmer motto of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. You got to put good stuff in to get good stuff out.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. In 1933, Claude Bristol wrote a little pamphlet, and it was just supposed to be something he shared with his friends, but his friends encouraged him to share it with the world. It was called TNT, It Rocks the Earth. And it was all about how you think. And basically what he was saying was, if you just control your thoughts actively every single day, you will begin to alter the speed with which you think differently or come to different conclusions. But it was all about this tap, 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 just like a stonemason. It's not the first tap at the chisel, and it may not be the 50th, but at some point, just that continuous tapping of the chisel on the granite will eventually split it in half. You can get anywhere you want to go, one step at a time, 1 mile at a time. If you envision where you want to go, and then you begin to think your way to that spot into your future, you'll get there. And it may take a while. I've got a friend, in fact, I actually wrote about him in my book, The Millionaire Maker. His name is John Calhoun, and he inspired me to, he sort of insulted me, which is his nature. And that's why we're such good friends. And he's like, oh, I kind of quit. And that's the story I tell in that book a little bit about him, is that I just kind of quit on this project. He goes, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to actually do this. But it just took that repetitive tap, tap, tap to get the hub free that we were working on. But in general, he kind of has this philosophy of like, how do you paint a house? One wall at a time.
Right.
Well, one wall, no, it's just one board at a time. No, it's just this spot in front of you. And you begin to chunk it down or make it into some sort of a relatable, it's just one thought between here and there. And how you think is totally determined by your own decision. A lot of us are just not, we're in neutral and allowing others to think for us or to direct us. I'm writing a new book right now in the Millionaire series, and it's called The Schoolyard Millionaire. And it's all based on the fact that my grandson, 10 years old, asked me one question: Papa, can I become a millionaire? And I'm okay. So my answer to his question is this book. And you know what it's about? It's a little bit about investing. It's a little bit about how money compounds and interest and all that. But really, it's about how you think. And why do you want something in life? And what do you think to get there? And are you taking daily measurable actions based on those thoughts? Or are you in neutral, just being bantied about, as Zig Ziglar called it, a wandering generality? Or are you a meaningful specific. All of that is to say how you think will create your future. If you can use your imagination and create a plan and then think your way through that plan and change your thoughts, you'll get there. It's like Steve Harvey said, if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand.
It's interesting because I think that sometimes, I mean, some of us have a tendency to be negative in certain maybe not in everything, but in certain things or in things like that. But even the act of catching myself in this time of because this is a very stressful time for me. There's no two ways about it. And I've kept it mostly to myself until the announcement yesterday. But I mean, I've got a lot of things going on. But even catching myself in my own thoughts or in talking to somebody, if I'm complaining about, how much I feel like in catching myself in putting a statement out and saying, instead of saying, I'm so stressed, I don't know how this is all going to work, instead of saying, I'm really working on it, or, just the act of just catching that and changing it feels so different. You actually can feel it when you catch those things and you make yourself say something a different way or think something a different way. To me, that is the indication that something is working. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And just saying it out loud. For example, I used to have a crippling fear of flying, like to the point where I would almost like B.A. Baracus from the A-Team require medication. Like I used to just pray for the day when they just be able to just, zap you, put you unconscious. You wake up 5 hours later in your destination or set, whatever. I was so fearful and my imagination would run wild and I would let it run wild. And people used to say, well, you're afraid of dying. No, it's not afraid of dying. I'm just afraid of watching my children's hair catch fire as we're exploding,
Wow.
or whatever. I mean,
Wow.
just had this vivid, awful imagination, and I couldn't get control of it for years and years. And I would dread. Tiffany would be so thrilled about the next beautiful vacation we're about to take, and I'd be living in dread and regret all the way up until the moment we landed, and then I would begin to sort of forget about it during the vacation, and then it would start to creep back in as we'd get ready to come home. Well, you know what changed? Not medication, not psychotherapy. I changed one thought. And I got this from Wayne Dyer, not in regards to flying, but in some other avenue. He wrote a book called There's a Spiritual Solution for Every Problem. I changed one thought in my mind based on his work and his book on Assisi, or Francis of Assisi. Anyway, he said, I began to change my thoughts about something, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I started saying, Michael, and I truly believe myself, I love the thrill of flying. And once I did that, and I just started repeating that to myself again and again, as I get nervous about the next trip, I say, oh, I love the thrill of flying. And suddenly it became my actual thoughts. And now when I experience turbulence in the air, I'm like, oh, I love the thrill of flying. This is fun. And I just changed that thought. It took me a little while. It wasn't overnight, but
crazy.
Eventually I got to a point where now I love to fly. I look forward to it.
Yeah. No, and I could see that. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in my mind, it's like, it's not terrifying, it's exhilarating, right? I mean, it's exhilarating.
Yes. So you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What do entrepreneurs do? They start new endeavors. They take on more than any other human can handle in that particular moment, because that's what they love to do. Elon Musk, how does he handle SpaceX, Tesla, X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it? He also has Solar City. Also has Starlink.
Boring company, right? The boring
company.
Yeah.
Building robots, Neuralink. How does all that happen? He loves the thrill of overwhelm and seeing what's possible. And for me, that would be crushing, and I would be just so riddled with anxiety I couldn't function. For him, his thoughts are, this is exciting. This is living at the edge. And that's why he's worth $330 billion.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, I mean, it is a matter of this. And again, just I'm trying to have been instilling this in my kids for years. And we've had some deep conversations about it recently with a couple of them, that same kind of thing, that, thoughts are things. You've got to, I mean, I used to stand in a mirror for years when I was younger, because I had some issues of worry and things like that. And I used to stand in the mirror in the morning and look myself in the eye and just have a talk with myself. I had some talking points that and it feels foolish the first dozen times you do it, but pretty soon it just feels natural. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you got this, kind of thing. And it sounds weird. And I don't know if it sounds, anyway, but it works. It programs that stuff in. All right. Lesson 60, Chris, give me the final thought.
Imagine the tomorrow you want, the future, your country's future, your company's future, your family's, whatever. It's all in your head. And that's to say that it's up to you. How you think is how you're going to live, and that'll be the result of your life.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thoughts are things, control them. Your future is in your mind. Pull that computer down and reprogram it. If you've got some negativity in your life, this is one of the ways that you help fix that and make it happen. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Hold the line for just a second. Folks, we're out of time. Don't forget to check out Chris this Friday at the Art Gallery if you're down in Homer. All right, we'll be back tomorrow, The Michael Duke Show. I appreciate it, Chris. This is, because again, this is just the stuff that you need to hear, especially when you're going through things. It's just the reminder that, hey, it's exciting, right? It's exhilarating. It's not terrifying. It's exhilarating. Or in your case, I love that exhilaration of flying. It's not that I'm terrified of it. It's that I love it. And it's just a change of mindset, right? It's just a change of that mindset.
It is. And I train, when I'm training salespeople or doing a presentation on selling, so often in our business, there's constant, like every single transaction you're part of has got 26, 28 moving parts at any given time. And something is always on fire, breaking down, or running out of gas. So it's overwhelming, and it can be incredibly exhausting mentally to a point where you're like, wouldn't it be better just to go dig ditches? Oh man, I come home exhilarated at the end of a day of digging a ditch, and I'm exhausted at the end of a day of selling. And what I teach people is something that I learned a long time ago, and it's created just an incredible amount of joy in my life. And the fact that I'm 30 years into a selling career is that I'm a professional problem solver. If ever I wake up to the day where there are no problems, I'm out of work. I love problems to solve. I'm a professional problem solver, and that changes everything. If I begin to get a little bit of overwhelm, I say, hold on, I'm a professional problem solver. This is what I get paid for.
Yeah.
Bring me the problem. I'm going to help solve it.
Bring it to me. I'm going to fix it. And it's not scary.
Not like you, who's a DJ ready to revolve it.
Yeah, I'm ready to step off the mic while the DJ revolve. It's, yeah. No, again, it's not scary. It's exhilarating. It's where you live. It's in that zone. You got to get out of that comfort zone. But you got to program yourself a little bit to get there sometimes. So, all right. Well, Chris Story, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. You, thanks for coming on board, and we'll see you on Friday.
See you Friday, but also, since you're new to town, the Nutcracker Fair is this weekend. I'll be selling my books at a booth up in the Commons at the high school all weekend. So we'll see you. Got a lot of opportunity to catch up, Michael.
A lot of stuff to happen. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for being part of it today. Folks, we got more coming up tomorrow. Should be Mike Shower. I'm assuming. I need to check in with him today. And maybe we'll get somebody else on board as well to talk about where things are potentially going. We will return the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Have a great day. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.